let's see if this works. I'm always questioning. It says it's starting, so that's progress. Let's get rid of this guy. We are live. All right, now to share it. Let's go. All right. We are live. I don't know how to change the thumbnail. All right, let's go ahead and get this started. Live chat is enabled. Cool. I'm gonna go with the pop-out chat so that I'm not watching myself the whole time. And now let's share it on the Twitter. Ooh, I'm gonna have to stop moving that. Chat Cardinal link. Share. Alrighty. And we're off. Hopefully. We'll see. We'll see. Let's put the chat back here. All right. What's up, everybody? I'm Tara Wellman. This is Birdseeds, and it's a new, and I don't know if it's improved or not, version of Birdseeds, but we're going to call it that. Actually, here's my explanation. The reason for doing Birdseeds live via the YouTube stream is that not just for today, but my schedule this time of year in the real world, not in the baseball realm, gets very, very complicated. And I don't know how much you've ever tried any sort of video blog style, but those of you who are bloggers and you write, you know what kind of time that takes. So for me to do a scripted, edited version of Birdseeds, like most of the episodes are, takes a good 3 hours. And when I get into this busy time of the year for me, I don't have 3 hours on any given Monday to do that, to put together a new Birdseeds episode. So I thought I'd give this a try. I don't know if we can make Birdseeds live a thing, but I believe in you. I think we can do it. And the cool part is this will archive it, so if you don't catch it live, you can go back and watch as if it was live. So I don't know how many people are going to watch this very first live stream, but if you are watching, feel free to jump into the live chat or to send me messages on Twitter. I've got my phone with me because I don't want to bog down the computer trying to, also, it's on my computer, so I don't want to move it around a lot, trying to watch on Twitter or watch your comments on Twitter. But feel free to tweet at me there or use the hashtag BirdseedsLive, and we can talk about things. So the Cardinals are in a very strange position of being not great, but not out of the race either. And I feel like this is the thing we've said about them a lot this season so far. But at this point in the year, when you get into September and you're talking about being less than a handful of games out of a postseason spot, you've got a different level of possibility, I guess. I think in large part, the fan base that has consistently watched this team over the year has felt like they were going to end up out of it at some point, and it was only a matter of time. The reverse has really happened, and just when you thought, they were 6 games back in the division, they were 4.5 back in the wild card, and it seemed like nothing was going their way, well, then all of a sudden, they're only 2 games out in the division. They're 3 games out in the wild card, and the teams ahead of them are not necessarily inspiring a lot of confidence in their ability to right the ship or to run away with the spot that they're in. So I keep, if you follow me on Twitter, you saw the link that both myself and Daniel Shoptaw shared from our podcast last night. And I kept saying it there, and I keep saying it when I talk about the Cardinals, and I give full credit to Dan McLaughlin because he's the one that keeps saying it on air, and I laugh every time, but he keeps saying, how has this happened? And I feel like that's the most appropriate exclamation, if you will, about this team this year, because it seems like against all odds, and not only against all odds, but against the seemingly unstoppable course of the season, here we are heading into, the second week in September with a team that's got a very real shot at the postseason. Now, before we talk about the Cardinals and their very real shot at the postseason, I just want to kind of pause, because this year has been such a roller coaster of trying to figure out who this team is, what they can be, how we should respond to it, that I think there are a number of people who, don't get me wrong, should the Cardinals make the playoffs and end up by some miracle making some deep run, much less actually winning the whole thing, I have, unlike perhaps Mike Matheny might have suggested earlier in the season, I have no problem believing that those people will be very, very excited about that reality. But I do think that there are people who look at the way that the season is progressing and the fact that the Cubs are not running away with the division, and kind of rolling their eyes a little bit and thinking, man, this was the year that was supposed to force the Cardinals into a position where they have to make some changes. If they make the postseason after everything that has gone wrong this year, I don't think that they're in quite the bind, or they won't. The front office won't feel like they're in quite the bind that we, the fans, have been trying to say that they're in. So I think there's kind of there's this weird dynamic with the fan base, with people who are trying to sort of reconcile these two realities, that, hey, the Cardinals might actually make the playoffs after all, but hey, if the Cardinals make the playoffs, the moves in the offseason might not be quite as dramatic, which is not really what anybody wants at this point, I don't think. So that's the strange imbalance, I guess, that's just a byproduct of the way the season has gone. The big hot button issue today on the Twitter is Mike Matheny talking about Adam Wainwright as the ace of the staff. The reactions to this have been quite dramatic, and maybe that's not a surprise, because it's Twitter and it's Mike Matheny, and this season it's Adam Wainwright, and it seems like anything you say about Wainwright is dramatic in the reaction that it merits. What's up, Patrick? Hey, Jordan. Mike is something. So I'm trying to sort of process this a little bit rationally. Although I think at the end of the day, we all know that it's trying to make Adam Wainwright be what Chris Carpenter was in 2011 for the Cardinals. It's foolish. It's not who Adam Wainwright is right now. It's not who he's been in a long time, and that doesn't take away from the career that he's had. My problem with trying to force the issue that Adam Wainwright is the ace of the staff is that I feel like it creates a scenario in which people forget or don't think about the significance of the career that he has had. It makes you really frustrated with where he is right now, and when you call him an ace, when you call him the leader of the staff, and he doesn't perform that way on the field, it leads to a lot of very frustrating commentary. And I think that's the biggest problem that I have with it. However, I do think that to some degree, it's not a surprise to hear Mike Matheny talk that way. He's been referred to as a player's manager before, almost to a fault. Maybe not even almost, maybe just to a fault. And I think that oftentimes he manages the way that he wishes a manager would have managed him, if that makes sense. So when he was at the tail end of his career, I think that he values the process that Adam Wainwright has gone through enough that he may put himself in Waino's shoes and think, man, this is how I would want a manager or a front office or a clubhouse to respond to the success that I've had in the past and to the career that I've put on the table and to the leadership that I've provided throughout all of that. So in that regard, I get where he's coming from. I get what he's trying to say. And I think that without actually being in the clubhouse, without knowing the conversations that take place or the leadership that really is truly there, it's impossible to sort of quantify the role that Adam Wainwright plays. But I think that trying to call him the ace naturally brings with it a level of expectation of performance on the field, regardless of what happens in the clubhouse. The fact that Adam Wainwright's a clubhouse guy doesn't make him the ace of the pitching staff. It might make him the leader of the team. It might make him a vocal leader in the clubhouse. But I think that at some point there's a certain expectation of physically being able to lead in the performance on the field. And at this point in Adam Wainwright's career, he is not the one doing that. He's physically not able to do that in the way that he has in the past. So this idea that Adam Wainwright is the ace or should be the ace or will always be the de facto ace regardless of what anyone else, namely Carlos Martinez, ever does, is silly to me. And I think that while I can understand why Mike Matheny wants to almost solidify what Adam Wainwright means to this team, I think he's creating the opposite effect for the fan base by trying to make Waino something to the pitching staff that he isn't, that he hasn't been. Not only this year, not the year before. Really not for a few years. And that's okay. That's the natural course of a career. I don't think, and I've said this before, if you go back and watch my Birdseeds episode about Adam Wainwright, I've said he doesn't have to be the Cy Young quality Adam Wainwright to still have value, to still merit a role on this team. It just might be different than it was when he was pitching at a Cy Young caliber, and that's okay, but that's a really, really, really hard point to get to when you're used to being the kind of athlete that can basically just will yourself to success. So that's my maybe not so hot take on Adam Wainwright and Mike Matheny. I think I get what he's trying to say. I think that it's silly to continue to force the issue by trying to insist that he's the ace when he is, in fact, not all of the things that an ace is expected to be, at least to the general public. So that's my thoughts on Adam Wainwright. What else is going on? What else is happening in the world of Cardinals baseball besides everyone suddenly realizing that, oh, Tommy Pham does actually have an eye issue, and it wasn't Mike Matheny just making that up. You know, I've heard some things through the grapevine. I know some people, and I think that the idea that there's this weird relationship between Tommy Pham and Mike Matheny, I think that's very real. I think that it's been made very clear a number of times this year. The extent of that, I would not say goes past the point of Mike Matheny making up physical excuses for why Tommy Pham isn't playing. Not that that hasn't ever happened with managers before, not that it couldn't happen. I don't know that there's really a whole lot of evidence of that being a typical Mike Matheny thing. So while I think that the relationship between Tommy Pham and Mike Matheny is probably very realistically a pretty strained relationship, I think that at this point they've figured out a way to work together, to work with each other, because they don't have any other choice. And I don't know that Mike Matheny is the kind of guy that's going to just make up things like an eye infection to try to keep people from asking why Tommy Pham really isn't in the lineup tonight. Does that mean that Mike Matheny has never made a lineup decision involving Tommy Pham that wasn't based on a physical issue? But, you know, by all means, that could certainly have been the case. I don't know that he's going to straight up make something up as a reason. I don't know that I really think that that's a thing. I don't know that we can know that that's a thing. We might suspect, we might wonder, but there are certain assumptions that I'm simply not willing to make, whether it's about Mike Matheny or about John Mozeliak or about the Rally Cat. Certain assumptions I just think are far too presumptuous to me. And you know what? If you're the kind of person that likes to assume about people, you do you. It's just not a thing that I'm comfortable with. So, hopefully Tommy Pham stops taking eye drops or any other medical care from the medical staff. There's an underlying problem there, but nonetheless. And you know, he gets back to where he needs to be. As a person who has had migraines most of my life, he mentioned that this eye situation has resulted in him having headaches for most of the last couple of weeks. It's very difficult to function at a normal, like, basic average level with a relentless headache. I can't imagine trying to go out and play at the intensity level that Tommy Pham does if he has in fact had a headache for the last couple of weeks. So that would explain why he hasn't been in the lineup as much. I think it would also explain why he hasn't maybe been quite as electric as he has been in the past. So here's hoping the off day is all that he needed to recover, and that he has thrown those eye drops far, far away, and that he's back to being the hero that we all need in the next road trip. Speaking of the Cardinals on the next road trip, this is the interesting thing about the way the season is sort of wrapping up. The Cardinals have not played particularly well against the NL Central, but that is the mountain they have to climb in order to finish the season, the regular season, on a high note. And as such, they're directly competing against the two teams that they need to beat to earn a spot in the postseason. They compete head-to-head with both the Cubs and the Brewers in this last month of the season. That is certainly a golden opportunity. And on the one hand, it feels like, hey, as long as that's the case, until they've played through those games, they still have a chance, just as much as anybody does. Because those head-to-head series are so critical when you're talking about a division race. The downside of that is that you can get buried a lot faster due to those head-to-head matchups as well. So I threw it out on Twitter last night, and I asked, just sort of sarcastically, because that's what I do 95% of the time, if you ever read something that I write and you wonder, is that sarcastic or is that for real? Just assume it's sarcasm. Okay, just as a rule of thumb. But I said last night after the Cardinals won, I said, so are the Cardinals good again, or Because we've seen this before, right? We saw this after the 3-45 start to the year. Then we saw them win enough games that we felt like, hey, they've turned the corner, and they went 18-6 or something. And then they fell apart again, and then they won 8 in a row, and it seemed like all was going to fall their way for the first time all season, and then they were a complete disaster. So that's the challenge with this Cardinals team, is that it's almost impossible to buy in because they've been so unable to sustain any of that success or to take advantage of the golden opportunities they've had, like playing in the NL Central against the two teams that you need to beat in order to win a division title for the last month of the season. Obviously, the Pirates and the Reds are mixed in there too, but you get the point. It's hard to figure out what is a reasonable expectation. And that has been the case all season. I think coming into the spring, we all felt like they're going to have their struggles. They still don't have a 3-hole hitter. They still had some questions in the bullpen. They still had some youth in the starting rotation, or guys coming back from injury, or Adam Wainwright, who was a question mark in and of himself. So coming into the year, we all felt like they should be, to some degree, better than last year. But we don't really know. And then they were way worse than we expected. And then they turned the corner, and it's been about like that since then. Up and down, up and down, up and down. I want to ask you this question. If you're watching live, feel free to answer in the comment section, the live chat, or on Twitter. If you're not watching live, just leave a comment below this video, because I want to know how significant you think the impact of the Memphis Redbirds coming up to the big league level has been in the recent success of this team. And I say that because it's not necessarily been one guy that came up and changed the entire dynamic of the skill set the Cardinals were putting on the field. I think it's been a solid rotation of different players that we've seen throughout the year, but then obviously when September call-ups happened, you're seeing them a bit more consistently. How much of an impact would you say that has been, from what you have seen, from what you have heard? Is it the addition of Harrison Bader and the guys in the bullpen, Ryan Sheriff, some of these guys that we didn't see a lot of to start the year, who are now getting some very legitimate Major League Baseball playing time? And secondarily to that, is it their play on the field that is creating that impact, or is it the kind of an intangible quality of bringing guys up who have won so much and been so consistently good and have created this very high expectation for what they do on the field because of their season at Memphis, that then is what's inspiring the success, rubbing off on some of those major leaguers who might be wearing down this time of year? I don't know. How do you think the success of Memphis, and then consequently the call-ups of those players who've been in that environment most of the year, how much do you think that impacts the Major League club? That's my question for you. Leave it in the comments below, because I think that's a very interesting dynamic to try to figure out. I don't think that's a thing that necessarily translates into any sort of metric, but I don't think you can discredit the idea entirely. Speaking of Memphis, with half their roster in St. Louis, they are just keeping on, just continuing right through their own playoff run, which has got to be a lot of fun for those guys, and for the AA Cardinals that are getting to play in the AAA playoffs. because that's how the whole transition has worked. I mean, Magneuris Sierra has now played at like 4 different levels this season, getting to experience the playoffs himself. So, for a minor league system that was not really touted as one of the best in baseball coming into this year, and one that I've talked about in the last several years as not being as good as it once was, not having the top tier prospects that created a lot of the Cardinals' homegrown success over the last half a dozen years. They've done their thing, man. I think that there's some credit to the management and the coaching, and some of it just to the sustained experience, I guess. It's kind of a weird way to say that, but I mean, you look at Patrick Wisdom, you look at Harrison Bader, you look at a number of those guys that have been at Memphis before. This isn't their first rodeo. And those are the guys that sort of led the charge for the Redbirds this season. I think there's something to that extra little bit of polish, that extra little bit of confidence that comes from maybe moving a little slower through the system. And we've seen Mo do that with guys before, maybe to the chagrin of the fan base at times, who want these young guys up there as fast as you can get them there. But he does seem to really believe in this sort of slow build and the process of developing in the minor leagues, and then you get these major league ready guys who are able to have success at the AAA level and then translate that very quickly to the major league game. Memphis has a gigantic influence. Yeah, I think that there's a very real value to that and to what they've brought. But I guess my intrigue is as much in the inspiration of the youth movement, not just the home runs that Harrison Bader has hit, because I think that I remember a number of years ago, it was really when the Memphis Mafia was a thing. Daniel Descalso and David Freese and John Jay, and they all really came up together. And they there was a comment. I don't remember if it was at a Blogger Day or if it was at a Cardinals Caravan event. But I very distinctly remember John Mozeliak talking about this idea that they want these guys to develop their individual skill sets at the minor league level, but they also want them to learn to win together so that they can sort of bring them up as a group and bring that success with them. I work a lot with minor league baseball teams in my real job, and I'm always intrigued by the media trained managers who seem to be able to turn any question back to the idea of how development of the individual player is the most important thing. And I find that to be very common, and I don't know that the sentiment from John Mozeliak is less common, but it's not necessarily the typical response. But there are occasionally those managers who will tell you, look, winning's very important to us because it teaches these guys how to win. Winning at that level isn't everything, but learning how to win is certainly a part of the game that's very important. So that's I guess the angle that I'm coming from with the impact that Memphis has had, and just wondering how much that mentality of going out there and knowing how to come from behind and win games, or going out there and knowing how to hold on to a lead, or going out there and knowing how well you have to play, how consistent you have to be in every facet of the game in order to create streaks and to win a number of games at a time. I think all of those things are very important, and again, may not translate in any sort of analytics, but I think have a very real intangible impact on a team. Even if you're the new kids on the block. So hey, Memphis, got to the playoffs in their own league. Now maybe they can get to the playoffs in the big leagues. Who knows? All right, second question, last question. I'm going to wrap this up because I'm actually off to a week of exciting work travel in the morning, and I had a bit of a nightmare that I slept too late and missed my flight. So I'm going to make sure that I'm packed and ready to go, and that I have like 7 alarms set on my phone so that I don't miss my flight in the morning. So I need to wrap this up is what I'm saying. Last question is, point blank, do the Cardinals make the postseason? Yes or no? Leave it in the comments below. And hopefully you enjoyed this Birdseeds Live, because this may be the only way I am able to sit down and talk about the Cardinals in video format while I'm off on the whirlwind adventures that are the fall and winter for me. So if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, just ignore it or give it another try. I don't know. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like in the comments on Twitter, and we'll do this again hopefully soon, and hopefully more people join us, because I think it's kind of fun. All right, I'm Tara Wellman. I'll see you next time on Birdseeds Live.